What's going on, everybody? Anthony Cervino here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel with my top 5 players that are not only must starts, but they are also going to go nuclear in week 9. We're going to start with Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, he's had some downfalls this year. But since week 6, he has put up 3 straight games over 24.3 quarterback fantasy points. In those games, he has thrown for 2 touchdowns and at least 215 yards in all of them. He's even rushed for a touchdown in that time period in a year where Josh Allen's rushing floor isn't what it's been in years past. I know that they gained Amari Cooper, but Amari Cooper has not been that big of an asset yet. He's not playing a full complement of snaps, but we know the enemy defense, they have to prepare as if Amari Cooper is going to have a large role, which means other weapons in this offense they're getting going. Notably, last week, we've seen Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Dalton Kincaid and Cook all do well in this offense. Now, if we look at the schedule, they have Miami. Back in week 2 against Miami, Buffalo dominated, but it was not a Josh Allen game. He went for 11.2 fantasy points, the second lowest total of the season for the outstanding quarterback. So why are we going to the Josh Allen well again, especially with the uncertainty of Amari Cooper and the fact that Miami's defense, they're number 1 when it comes to fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, is because historically, Josh Allen has pummeled the Miami Dolphins. In fact, in 14 career starts, Josh Allen has put up over 30 fantasy points in 10 of them. Granted, the last one was a dud, but in these matchups, Josh Allen shows out. He destroys the Miami Dolphins, and if he's in your fantasy lineup, this is a player that you should be comfortable starting, and we don't have to temper expectations. Let's assume Josh Allen is going to be a week winner for you. Let's go to another one, Bijan Robinson. And Bijan Robinson, another player, a little bit of a slow start, a little bit of an erratic start, under 16.2 PPR points in his first 5 games up to week 5. In the past 3 games, however, Bijan Robinson, he's starting to cook. He's gone over 23.3 PPR points now in 3 straight games. He is getting it done as a receiver out of the backfield. He is getting it done on the ground. 2 of the past 3 games, at least 95 yards rushing. 2 of the past 3 games, over 40 yards receiving. We are starting to see the very best version of Bijan Robinson, which we've been waiting for since the day he's been drafted. And when it comes to a smash spot, he's going to take this momentum into a game against the Dallas Cowboys. And Dallas's defense, they're giving up the 3rd most PPR points to the running back position. Dallas is not good at defending the run. And I get they're getting some defensive reinforcements like Deron Bland, the All-Pro from last season, which makes their secondary outstanding. But when it comes to stuffing the run, Deron Bland does not help. In fact, I think Dallas could do a very good job containing Kirk Cousins and his pass-catching weapons, but this is going to be a Bijan Robinson game. Dallas, they are giving up 27 points per game to enemy running backs for the year. The NFL average is 22.6, which means they're giving up 19.2% more fantasy points per game to enemy running backs than the NFL average. We've seen guys like Isaac Guerendo out of nowhere. David Montgomery in the past 2 games go for at least 19. How about earlier this year when Kamara and Derrick Henry absolutely pummeled this Dallas Cowboys defense? Now they have to contain Bijan Robinson. This is going to be another 20-plus point outing for the second-year runner. Let's go to Tony Pollard, another must-start running back, and Pollard has been very, very solid. 19.3 touches per game, 66.6 yards after contact. He's getting 13.3% of his team targets. This offense is Tony Pollard reliant. In fact, Tony Pollard is the Tennessee offense with all the quarterback issues. It's the Tony Pollard show. He gets it done as a receiver. He gets it done as a runner. In all but 2 games this year, we've had at least 14.7 PPR points out of Tony Pollard. That 14.7 was a low spot, and that came last week against Detroit, the second toughest matchup for enemy running backs, and he still goes for 20 attempts, 94 yards. He also caught 3 or 4 targets for 23 yards. He's a touchdown away from going over 20 fantasy points for the first time this year. The matchup opens up this week against the New England Patriots. I absolutely love this spot. This is another defense that gets pummeled by enemy runners. If we look, now they contained Breece Hall and the Jets last week. The Jets are a mess right now. But let's go back to a few games prior. We've seen Tank Bigsby go for 23. In that same game, Dearness Johnson scores and goes for 10. How about Joe Mixon going for 27 in week 6? Well, Dameon Pierce also scored and went for 14.7. You see where I'm going here. Guys like Jordan Mason went for 24 earlier this year. This is a spot for Tony Pollard to go over 20 PPR points for the first time in 2024. We know that Spears is a little bit banged up. We don't know if he's playing or not. And I get that Pollard is dealing with a foot injury that held him out of practice. But barring any setbacks, we expect Tony Pollard to be good to go for Sunday. And if he is, I'm starting Tony Pollard with confidence. Let's go to a wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. New year, same trajectory for CeeDee Lamb. As we know, last year, CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys passing attack, they got off to a slow start. After their bye week, it was like a new football team. This year, the same deal. They go into their bye week struggling. We see Dak and CD not getting along on the sideline. They come out of their bye week. In San Francisco, CeeDee Lamb goes ballistic. 39.6 PPR points. He catches 13 of 17 targets for 146 and 2 touchdowns. In fact, he has now gone back-to-back games with at least 14 targets. This is a CeeDee Lamb we thought we were drafting with a top 3 pick in fantasy drafts. He got off to the slow start, but what do we know? We know that moving forward, the Cowboys have one of, if not the easiest, quarterback wide receiver matchup calendar. This week you get Atlanta, and let's scale back to last week against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, a team that did not have Godwin or Evans, and they still managed to score a lot of points throwing the football to ancillary weapons and tight ends. Atlanta is not going to be able to hold down CeeDee Lamb. This is a must-have spot for the Dallas Cowboys. This is a must-win spot for Dallas. This is a must-have spot for Dak Prescott. And this defense, they're pretty good against the run. They're Swiss cheese against the pass. This is another player that you put in your fantasy lineup, and you're going to assume he could potentially pop for 30 points once again. This is another nuclear week for CeeDee Lamb. Let's close this out. The last player we're going to talk about today is Cade Otton at the tight end position. It's been a position of players we cannot trust. And Cade Otton is emerging as a reliable fantasy asset. What do we know about Cade Otton? Well, in back-to-back games, at least 18 PPR points. He goes for a season-high 29.1 last week. He's now had back-to-back games with 10 targets, 8 receptions, and 81 yards. Now, last week, in his first full game without Evans and Godwin, he catches 9 of 10 targets for 81 yards and a pair of touchdowns. He also had 3 red zone targets and a total of 6 red zone targets in his past 3 games. He is getting 18.2% of the team targets while being targeted on 21.3% of the routes he is running. He is going to take this momentum against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is the easiest matchups for enemy tight ends. Kansas City, they don't give up fantasy production to tight ends. Tight ends have their way with the Kansas City Chiefs. If you go down the line, players that include Isaiah Likely, Mike Gesicki, Foster Moreau, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers, they've all gone for double-digit fantasy points against Kansas City. And in a game where we know Baker Mayfield does not have a lot of weapons to work with, Cade Otton is going to be leaned on early and often and could be a league winner and a week winner at the tight end position in week 9.